Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, was not your ordinary psychic. This man made over 14,000 documented predictions while in a trance state, and the accuracy of his visions has baffled scientists, historians, and skeptics for decades. He predicted the stock market crash of 1929. He foresaw the beginning and end of both world wars. He described the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls years before they were found. But perhaps his most disturbing predictions were about America's future leadership and a time of great tribulation that would begin in the mid-2020s. Before we dive into what Cayce said about 2026, you need to understand who this man was and why his prophecies have been taken so seriously by millions around the world. Edgar Cayce was born in 1877 in Kentucky, a simple man with only an 8th grade education. But when he entered his trance state, something extraordinary happened. He would lie down, close his eyes, and begin speaking in a completely different manner, using medical terminology he had never learned, discussing historical events he had never studied, and describing future occurrences with startling precision. The medical establishment was initially skeptical, but case after case proved that Cayce could diagnose illnesses and prescribe treatments while unconscious, treatments that worked when conventional medicine had failed. Doctors began consulting him, scientists studied him, and gradually, people started asking him about the future. That's when things became truly unsettling. Cayce spoke of a period he called the Tribulations that would come to America. He described a time when the nation would be divided against itself, when coastal regions would face unprecedented natural disasters, when the economic system would collapse and rebuild, and when a leader would rise who would bring the country to the brink of transformation or destruction. The years he most frequently mentioned in his readings about America's greatest trial: 2025 and 2026. Now, here's where it gets chilling. In several readings from the 1930s and 1940s, Cayce described a figure in American leadership during this period. He never used names, of course, but the characteristics he outlined are hauntingly familiar. He spoke of a man who would come to power through unconventional means, someone who was not a traditional politician, someone who had built towers, a man associated with gold and wealth, who would speak boldly and divide the nation like no other leader in modern history. Cayce said this figure would face his greatest test in his second significant period of influence. According to the readings, this would occur during a year of earth changes and global restructuring. The man would be confronted with a choice, a moment where his decisions would either save millions or lead to unprecedented catastrophe. And that moment, according to the timeline Cayce laid out, falls squarely in 2026. But what exactly did Cayce predict would happen? This is where we need to look carefully at the specific readings. In reading 3976-15, given in 1934, Cayce spoke of great changes in the earth that would begin gradually and then accelerate rapidly. He mentioned that these changes would be accompanied by the breaking up of conditions in the South Pacific, the Mediterranean, and along the American coasts. He specifically noted that these events would coincide with a testing time for those in positions of power. In another reading, 1152-111 from 1939, Cayce was asked about the future of democracy in America. His response was cryptic, but deeply troubling. He said that democracy would face its greatest internal threat, not from war or invasion, but from the division of its own house. He stated that this division would reach its peak when the man of commerce holds the highest office, and that this man would face a decision between the money changers and the people that would determine the survival of the democratic system. Think about that for a moment. A man of commerce in the highest office, facing a decision about economic powers versus the people. Does this sound familiar to you? But there's more, much more. In another reading, 1152 to 111 from 1939, Casey was asked about the future of democracy in America. His response was cryptic, but deeply troubling. He said that democracy would face its greatest internal threat not from war or invasion, but from the division of its own house. He stated that this division would reach its peak when the man of commerce holds the highest office, and that this man would face a decision between the money changers and the people that would determine the survival of the democratic system. Think about that for a moment. A man of commerce in the highest office, facing a decision about economic powers versus the people. Does this sound familiar to you? But there's more, much more. Casey also spoke extensively about what he called the earth changes that would mark this period. He predicted that the years 2025 and 2026 would see massive seismic activity, particularly along the Pacific coast and in areas that had long been dormant. He said that these natural disasters would force the government to make emergency decisions that would test the very fabric of constitutional authority. The leader in power, he claimed, would have to choose between maintaining order through extreme measures or allowing chaos to unfold while preserving freedom. This is the crossroads Casey saw for 2026, and it's connected directly to the figure he described as the businessman leader. In reading 270 to 35 from 1936, Casey was even more specific. He spoke of a period when the destroyer becomes the builder, or the builder becomes the destroyer. He said this transformation would happen in the mid-2020s and would involve the American leader, either embracing a new path of unity and reconstruction or doubling down on division and conflict. The choice, according to Casey, would come after a great shaking, both in the earth and in the halls of power. Now, let's connect this to Donald Trump specifically. Trump returned to the presidency in January 2025. According to Casey's timeline, the critical year of testing would be the second year of this term, 2026. Casey spoke of natural disasters, economic upheaval, and international conflicts that would all converge during this time. He said the American leader would face pressure from forces both seen and unseen, and would have to make a choice that goes against everything his previous path had been about. What could this choice be? Some Casey scholars believe it relates to a major economic decision. Casey predicted that the old financial system would need to collapse for a new one to emerge, but that this collapse could happen in two ways: controlled and gradual, or chaotic and destructive. The leader in power would have to choose which path to take, and that choice would require humility and wisdom over pride and self-interest. Others interpret Casey's readings as pointing to a military or geopolitical crisis. In several readings, Casey mentioned conflicts involving Russia, China, and the Middle East that would come to a head during this period. He suggested that the American leader would have to choose between escalation toward global conflict or an unprecedented act of diplomacy and peacemaking that would go against his instincts and his base of support. But perhaps the most disturbing interpretation comes from reading 3976-29, where Casey spoke about a cleansing that would come to America through natural forces. He said that coastal cities would face flooding and destruction, and that the government's response to these disasters would reveal whether the leader served himself or the people. Cayce specifically mentioned that this leader would face criticism for his response and would have to decide whether to accept responsibility and change course, or to blame others and continue on a destructive path. Given everything we've seen regarding climate events, rising sea levels, and increasingly severe weather patterns, this prediction seems less mystical and more like a looming reality. And if Cayce was right about the timing, 2026 could see catastrophic natural disasters hitting American shores that would test any administration's capacity to respond with compassion and competence. Cayce also made another prediction that's particularly relevant to Trump's situation. He spoke of legal troubles and investigations that would surround the leader during this period. In reading 257 to 254, he mentioned that the man of towers would face judgments from earthly courts that would threaten to remove him from power, but that these earthly judgments would be less important than the judgment he makes upon himself. This suggests an internal reckoning, a moment of personal transformation that would be more significant than any external legal battle. We've certainly seen ongoing legal challenges facing Trump, and according to Cayce's timeline, these would intensify in 2026, creating additional pressure during an already critical time. But Cayce seemed to suggest that the legal issues were almost a distraction from the real spiritual and moral test the leader would face. Now, here's what makes all of this even more fascinating and frightening. Cayce didn't just make predictions. He also spoke about probabilities and choices. He consistently emphasized that the future was not fixed, that human free will could alter outcomes, and that prophecy was more about warning than predetermination. In other words, what Cayce saw for 2026 was the most probable outcome based on the path America and its leaders were on. But it could be changed through conscious choice and action. This means that the prophecy about Trump and 2026 is not set in stone. It's a warning, a signpost pointing to a critical junction. According to Cayce, if the leader chooses wisely, chooses humility over pride, unity over division, and service over self-interest, then the outcome could be transformative in a positive way. America could emerge from the crisis stronger, more unified, and ready to lead the world into a new era of cooperation and enlightenment. But if the opposite choice is made, if pride wins over wisdom, if division is deepened rather than healed, then Cayce's darker predictions would come to pass. He spoke of economic collapse that would take decades to recover from, social unrest that would tear communities apart, and natural disasters that would reshape the geography of America itself. And at the center of it all would be the leader who failed to rise to the occasion when it mattered most. Some people dismiss Cayce's prophecies as vague enough to apply to any situation. But when you dig into the specific details he provided, the parallels are hard to ignore. A businessman president, a second significant term, the year 2026, natural disasters and earth changes, economic crisis and restructuring, legal battles and investigations, the choice between building and destroying. All of these, according to Cayce, all of these elements would converge in 2026, creating a perfect storm that would force both the leader and the nation to confront their true values and make choices about the kind of future they want to create. The prophecy is not about doom, it's about transformation. But transformation always requires a death of the old before the new can be born, and that process is rarely comfortable or easy. The question that remains is whether we're willing to pay attention to the warning signs, to take Casey's prophecy seriously enough to prepare ourselves mentally, spiritually, and practically for what may be coming. Because if Casey was right about so many other things, if his track record of accurate predictions means anything, then we need to take seriously what he said about 2026 and the test that awaits America and its leadership. This isn't about politics. This isn't about taking sides. This is about understanding that we're living through a pivotal moment in history, a moment that a prophet predicted almost a century ago. Whether you support Trump or oppose him, whether you believe in prophecy or not, the convergence of events that Casey described is becoming harder to ignore, and that should matter to all of us. The sleeping prophet saw a fork in the road ahead, a moment of decision that would determine the course of history for generations to come. That moment is approaching rapidly. The year 2026 is no longer a distant future. It's right around the corner. And if Edgar Cayce was right, we're all about to witness something extraordinary, something that will shock the world and change everything we thought we knew about leadership, prophecy, and the power of human choice. If this prophecy has opened your eyes to something you hadn't considered before, if it's made you think differently about what's coming in the next 2 years, then I need you to do something important. Share this video with everyone you know. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the follow-up videos where we'll dive even deeper into Casey's specific predictions for the coming months. Hit that notification bell, because as these events begin to unfold, you'll want to be among the first to understand what's happening and what it means. And most importantly, leave a comment below telling me what you think. Do you believe Casey's prophecy about Trump and 2026? What signs are you already seeing? Let's have that conversation, because understanding what's coming is the first step to preparing for it. The future is not written in stone, but it is written in the choices we make today. Make sure you're making choices you can be proud of when history looks back on this moment.